Hey everybody, welcome to Sliding Into My DMs. I'm Colby, and these are some of my DMs. Preston, Corey, Corey, and Mr. Rogers. So thanks for being here, guys. Appreciate having you, especially on a little bit of short notice because today I wanted to talk about the new Unearthed Arcana that Wizards of the Coast just came out with yesterday.
Oh boy!
Now I'm gonna forget the name. The something Gothic This Way Comes. What's it called?
Gothic Lineages, baby.
Gothic Lineages.
So awesome.
So
Hannibal Lecter.
Yes, I think for all those who are fans of, things horrible and macabre, then this is fantastic. And there's some other sort of maybe more meta, I think, issues that I also want to get into that this particular Unearthed Arcana discusses. Yes, Corey.
I would like to ask a question before we begin.
Yeah.
Did anybody have a goth phase growing up?
I had an emo phase. Does that count?
Probably the closest to emo.
Yeah, closest. Yeah.
I think you probably know the answer to that question just by looking at me.
Yeah. I know that you had a huge one. So.
I cranked My Chemical Romance and Dashboard Confessional for 5 to 10 years straight.
Wait, is Dashboard Confessionals goth or is that emo?
No,
emo.
Okay,
emo.
I was gonna say
You cut yourself while you cry about losing your girlfriend.
Our music would be Evanescence. If you listen to a lot of Evanescence, you might be a goth.
So Corey, how about you? Did you have a goth face?
I did not.
No
Unfortunately.
eyeliner, no.
Nope, nothing. I didn't play any Vampire the Masquerade or anything like that. It's surprising, but
I played Vampire the Masquerade, the video game version, like just a few years ago because I'd heard great things about it, and I think it got a facelift or something, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't get all that far into it because something about myself that I've learned, I just don't like horror in general, and stuff and that game wasn't particularly super horror-y, but
weren't you the one who was pushing the hardest to do Strahd though?
I was, but because it was Halloween, so there's a time and a place.
So we can't play till October. Nope.
Well, that might be the case anyway.
Well, yeah.
It's always Halloween.
I'd heard lots of great things about Strahd, and I did play Ravenloft back when it was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and have very fond memories. So I wanted to relive that moment from my youth a little bit. So.
Okay, well then by the rules of Price is Right, I think it goes to Dallin because he's the closest to goth without going over.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
All right, I'm coming on down the aisle. Okay, so cool. Then I guess I'm gonna cover the Reborn.
Yeah, but wait, before we get into the specific lineages, I wanted to do a round robin and just kind of get everybody's general impressions with this particular Unearthed Arcana. I guess I should mention, obviously, for those who don't know, Unearthed Arcana is not technically officially in game. It's being beta tested for all intents and purposes, right? So this could very well be altered before it gets any sort of official release from Wizards of the Coast. And I myself have been burned a little bit on trying to include Unearthed Arcana in my builds in the past because I would do Rune Knight. In a couple of my builds, I'm like, Rune Knight, it's so strong, it's so great. And then Tasha's came out and they're like, nerf. And I'm like, it's not as good as it used to be.
They're watching you.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, let's be clear about that. But with that said, it is sort of at least sort of pseudo-sanctioned, right, by Wizards, and they're looking for us as players to test it out and to give them feedback on it. So maybe here's an opportunity for us to discuss it and give our thoughts. So yes, general impressions. What do you guys think? We'll start, Preston. What were your impressions with
So high level impressions, I liked it because anytime it affords additional customability or additional ways to make your character unique and break away, or not necessarily that that you always have to be unique to have fun, but I love giving my players the opportunity to be able to branch out and be like, hey, I want to do this, but I'm not XYZ race. Now that it's about lineage and not about the specifically the race of the character, I think it's kind of nice, and I look forward to seeing the other stuff that they have to offer.
Okay, what do you think, Corey?
First of all, I agree with Preston about what he said. You don't have to be unique in order to be a good player.
If
have a good character.
Everyone's super, then no one is.
Exactly. Some of my best characters have been basic human fighters. They're the funnest. What I'm really excited for is this is the next step in their initiative in being more inclusive and less limiting in their scope of all elves are dexterous and all orcs are strong and stupid, kind of thing. I kind of like how this is their next step of being like, hey, we're not including ability scores anymore. And I bet you if they do any sort of 5.5 edition or 6th edition, you'll see that go away entirely. They'll just say you pick 2 ability scores that your character was good at growing up, and then you have your race, which determines certain physical traits like dark vision and etc.
Yeah.
Then I can have my Luxodon samurai and not feel bad.
Exactly.
They definitely
Never
do
feel bad anyway.
seem to be doubling down on kind of getting away. Well, just opening up options and letting people kind of say, I want to play whatever I want to play, and not tying sort of your attributes and things like that to a specific race, which I think is cool. Not everyone agrees, obviously. I think there's a lot of people out there that like the old school. They want their elves to be elfy and they want their dwarves to be dwarfy, and that means dexterous and lithe on the one hand, and hardy and curmudgeon-y on the other, and never the twain shall meet. But no, I think it's nice to sort of break the shackles a little bit, as it were, of those tropes and stereotypes.
And just because somebody else's race doesn't conform to what you would think of as a dwarf doesn't mean that you can't play a dwarf that way.
Exactly. Mr. Rogers?
Pretty much just the same stuff, so I don't want to harp on it too much. I mean, I think we've got that covered.
Okay. So, Preston, I needed to call out your new background. It looks like the tavern brawl has been resolved, which I'm grateful for. And now we have some magnificent creature with.
Am I okay to do a shout out?
Magical wolf, absolutely. Yeah. That's what I'm doing here.
This is a shout out. This was a custom commission for my wife. This is her paladin rogue Venfina and her blink dog. Before you say anything, yes, I know that that's not an official steed. It's whatever, but
I'm more upset about the paladin rogue, but that's just
yeah. Well, I know that people are going to be more whatever about it, but yeah, Stumpy Fongo. If you want to check him out, he's on Twitch. So
Stumpy Fongo.
Stumpy Fongo. Stumpy.
Link to that, maybe.
Yeah, I'll try and remember to stick a little.
He does great work, and if you like D&D commissions, he does a lot of different kind of stuff. So
awesome! It looks fantastic.
And happy birthday to Rebecca, my wife.
Happy birthday, Rebecca. That's awesome. Okay, so before we get into the specific new lineages, there were a couple of specific points that I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on here. Particularly of interest to me, and this kind of goes along a little bit with what we've already been talking about, but there was a little text box, right, that was called design note, and I wanted to focus on that a little bit, and I'm going to quote from it first for those who haven't had a chance to read it, and just to refresh our memories. It says this: the race options in this article and in future D&D books lack the ability score increase trait, the language trait, the alignment trait, and any other trait that is purely cultural. Racial traits henceforth reflect only the physical or magical realities of being a player character who's a member of a particular lineage. Such traits include things like dark vision, a breath weapon as in the Dragonborn, or innate magical abilities as in the Forest Gnome. Such traits don't include cultural characteristics like language or training with a weapon or a tool. So here's my question. I just did a build this week, and one of the characters in it was a custom lineage character, but they were taking the double-bladed scimitar as a weapon choice. Now, traditionally, the double-bladed scimitar has a prerequisite that you cannot use it unless you are an elf. Do you think that that is no longer the case, or do you think that when they're talking about tying, say for example, training with a weapon or a tool to somebody's lineage or race, they just mean like currently in the game, right? You have, if you're an elf, you have proficiency with certain weapons, right? A long sword, a short sword, and some other things like that. Are they just talking about that, or are they trying to truly unshackle things like, you know, whether it be prerequisites for a weapon requirement or even prerequisites for a feat, which I talk about all the time in my show, right? What are your thoughts?
Clarifying question.
Yes.
Is the double-bladed scimitar considered a magic weapon, or is it a mundane weapon?
No, not necessarily. You can get magical double-bladed scimitars, but
and in my opinion, there's no way that, or there is no reason that a character raised by elves but not an elf should not be able to wield that weapon. I mean, if you're trained in that weapon as an elf, and that's the reason why you can use the double-bladed scimitar, then being raised by elves should get you the same bonus, especially if you have a good finesse. And any dungeon master that says, oh, you can't use a double-bladed scimitar because it's for elves only, they're probably not going to be that fun to play with.
They're old school. They're traditional.
Drop the gauntlet.
They're conservative.
Well, go back to 2E where you have to be an elf as a rate or a class instead of a race, you know?
Right. Well, what do you guys think, Mr. Rogers, Preston?
Totally agree. I think at my table, I would say go for it 100%.
Yeah, and for mine, I guess I can see where some people, like when you get maybe stuck in the minutia of like the rules as written and things that as they were written, when they were written, and trying to apply new rules to them can get a little confusing.
Yes.
But I mean, looking at this in this new light, and at least in the intent, I think it's that it goes back to setting that precedent when you start with your players. And if you say, hey, I don't necessarily for this campaign, we're going to like set these ground rules, as long as everybody's at the tables agrees with it, then I, run with it if that's what you want to do. But for me on my table, I would say, stuff like the elven accuracy, drop the elven, it's now accuracy for me. Like it doesn't, or like any, what is that? Isn't there like a dwarven brawling feat or something?
Xanthar's had, all kinds
of that kind of stuff that like previously, like if you can, if you're living in those conditions, no matter what race, how big, small, whatever they are, I don't care if it was a halfling growing up with a bunch of Goliaths, if they're all arm wrestling and that's what they learned how to do when they were growing up, then I think it's valid. It's something.
Sure. I agree with a caveat. There has to be so the reason why these feats exist as like elven accuracy is basically like, hey, you chose to be an elf, and so you're being rewarded with that with a special feat, right? Mm-hmm. So if you just say drop the elven and give everybody accuracy that wants it, then you're basically just kind of saying, no, there's not really any reward for being an elf. However, if you agree with your players that you're including custom lineage in the game, that custom lineage includes you were raised by a specific race. And I think that very much changes the rules as written for a double-bladed scimitar or elven accuracy to include anyone with the custom lineage raised by that race. It's going into a lot of like guesswork and outer logic that I like to apply, but it is typically that's what I would go with.
And echoing in that same thing, just like, yes, I completely agree with that. And then when I would apply it is things like, say, dragon breath, right? If you're a dragonborn, you have the ability to breathe fire. I feel like if they want to work into their custom lineage that somehow they're like a tabaxi dragonborn, whatever trifecta that they want to go with, and that's why they want to start bringing those in, I might start to scratch my head more and be like, wait, let's start to draw the line here. Or maybe, hey, we're going to use dragonborn class and apply for flavor, you're a tabaxi.
Dragonborn isn't a feat, though.
I think
correct, not as a feat, but just like as a trait.
I think that's an important distinction to make, right?
Yeah.
Because so to Corey's point, you know, if you're taking custom lineage, right? Even if you want to say I was raised by Dragonborn and therefore I can do this, or I was raised by elves and therefore I can get the Elven accuracy feat, it doesn't mean necessarily that you, in the elf case, that you don't need to sleep, that you have dark vision guaranteed anyway, that you know, all the other things that make an elf like biologically,
and that's
whatever.
absolutely what this Unearthed Arcana is trying to convey, right? Is there's two different types of traits. There are learned traits and there are inherent traits.
Mhm.
And inherent traits are literally, my species has developed to have dark vision. You know, like a human growing up with drow is going to have a hard time walking around. You know, they're going to end up hurting themselves a lot or needing to carry a torch.
Sure.
However, drow can still train them to use whatever drow weapons and whatever drow magic if they have that, you know, adaptation magic as its own little monster. But the point with the double-bladed scimitar is, if you think about it logically, the only limiting factor for the scimitar is the fact that elves would be highly trained in it, and that's what makes it unique.
Right.
And if your GM wants to argue that it requires 100 years of training, well then fine, you know, roll your eyes and say, okay, whatever, I'm going to use 2 single scimitars.
Sure. No, and I like that. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, to take it a step further, I guess, or get back to your point, Preston, you know, if you had somebody that was taking the custom lineage because they wanted to maybe look like a dragonborn, but have different features and functionality, that's fine, but they don't get to have their cake and eat it too. And they don't get to have a breath weapon like regular Dragonborn, and they don't have to
flavor the other.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess I agree. Obviously, people who watch my show know my stance on this because I'm constantly saying things like, okay, take custom lineage and then you're going to be a custom elf and therefore you're going to get elven accuracy, right? And maybe your DM might say, in Corey's case, I think especially, hey, you've got to work this into your backstory. You can't just you can't just pick and choose from like a smorgasbord of what were previously known to be racial feats, and say, well, I mean, I don't know, maybe you would allow this. I was raised by elves, but then I spent my teenage years amongst dwarves so I can get this dwarven feat. And then from 20 to 30, I lived, you know, with the gnomes.
You're
and so
within reason.
Yeah,
Sure.
there's got to be a reason there. Again, it kind of comes down to the whole like multiple classes, multiple races. Like there's a hard limit for me on multi-classing. There's a hard limit on multi-racing too.
Sure.
One thing that I will point out is if anybody decides to go down to the comments and say something like, "Oh well, elven accuracy is because elves are really good because that's how they developed it with the bows and whatnot." No, that's all learned traits. And you're applying logic that D&D and Wizards of the Coast are trying to get away from.
Yeah, they do seem to be now. As far as I know, to date, let's see, what's today? January 27th, 2020, or 2021. Thank you. Wizards has not come out and made an official ruling on, you know, whether or not, for example, you could take custom lineage and then still qualify for a racial feat. Rules as written, and the community seems to be sort of very divided on it. So I have to believe that it's just a matter of time before they do make a ruling one way or the other. But regardless, it does definitely seem like, and especially with this, you know, with both Tasha's and then now this new UA, that they are continually moving more towards trying to, you know, unshackle, uncouple, whatever, racial prerequisites with the sort of biological race that you choose, and allowing you to say, hey, you know, this was a learned thing that I acquired, and that's important to my character, whatever, right? Okay, so moving on. I wanted to talk about, before we get into the lineages, also creature type. So there's quite a bit here that they want to spell out on creature types, which I found really interesting. And again, let me just read. So every creature in D&D, including every player character, has a special tag in the rules that identifies the type of creature they are. Most player characters are of the humanoid type. a race option presented here tells you what your character's creature type is, and then it gives you a list of types. Here's a list of the game's creatures types in alphabetical order: aberration, beast, celestial, construct, dragon, elemental, fey, fiend, giant, humanoid, monstrosity, ooze, plant, and undead. These types don't have rules themselves, but some rules in the game affect creatures of certain types in different ways. Having more than one type. Some creatures are of more than one creature type. If an effect works on at least one of the creature types, that effect can work on the creature. For example, if you're a humanoid and an undead, Cure Wounds works on you since it works on a humanoid. Okay, so all of that said and spoken, here's my question. Is this telling me that rules as written, as a player now, I can choose my type, that I can be a giant or an ooze for that matter?
Sadly, I don't think so. As much as I want to be an ooze, I don't think that that's the case. I think it's basically setting up the fact that we are going to get more races like that. Because the 3 lineages in this Unearthed Arcana that we'll get to, each of them has a custom additional creature type. Creature type. But they haven't quite given you the carte blanche to be whatever you want for a custom lineage yet.
Right. At least not for creature type. Yes. Yeah. What do you guys think, Preston and Mr. Rogers?
I think if a player were to come to me and say, I want to be an ooze, I would follow the rules of where it says you can have multiple types, right? So you could be a humanoid ooze. And so maybe you're kind of just like an ooze in a really long trench coat.
Human mate with an ooze to create the you know what? Don't answer that question.
Don't even go there.
Weird art.
Bad anime.
But yeah, if they wanted to be an ooze in a long trench coat, I would allow it, but
only if they're wearing a long trench coat.
Yeah,
otherwise,
exactly.
Can I be?
You have to be 3 small oozes.
You look at an Oblex though. An Oblex is technically an ooze, isn't it?
Yeah, an Oblex is an ooze.
It creates humanoids, so maybe you are like maybe you're one of those living in the world and you don't even know it until one day
somehow you got severed from
you're the kingfisher for him.
I think going into the whole can I be an ooze gets into the category of, okay, but we have to come up with some custom traits because there's no DM worth the salt is going to look at it and go, well, you're an ooze, but you can't squeeze through tight spaces or anything like that. You have to follow the rules of the race that you are.
Yeah.
Right. So it would take a little homebrew, I think, but I'd be willing to give it a shot. It sounds fun.
Okay.
I think it sounds great too.
But rules as written, I think the consensus is no. Right. All it's saying is, all it's saying is, most player characters are of the humanoid type. We're about to present you with some new options that are half and half, but still half humanoid, half something else, right?
Yep. And I think
also, for the record, here are all of the different types that a creature can be, but we're not saying your PC can be any one of these.
Yeah. And I think the whole point of this is to say, hey, there are people who can be multiple creature types, and if they are, they're affected by everything positively and negatively as far as because they specifically wanted to make lineages that are undead in addition to humanoid in this Unearthed Arcana, but they didn't want to limit them by not being able to be cured by positive healing spells.
Right.
So they came up with this rule of, if you're both types, well, the positive effects affect you positively,
Wouldn't that be interesting if in fact you could not be healed if you were even partially undead, and then instead would need some sort of like necrotic energy, inflict wounds would now cure you.
Back in 3.5, and I think Pathfinder does it too, but back in 3.5, the inflict spell did cause negative energy damage, which healed undead. So you wanted to be very careful about what you use there. And I think if you had a DM that wanted to play a hardcore mode, they said, okay, you can be an undead, but you cannot be affected by healing spells, and I think that'd be perfectly valid. It sounds fun and challenging, but at the same time, they don't want to make that the norm. They want to make it as inclusive as possible, and then let the DMs narrow the scope rather than they narrow the scope.
Yeah. It sounds like Corey's coming up with his next one shot.
Night of the Living Ooze.
That time we all got
It just oozes all the way
reincarnated.
down from here on
That
out.
time
Sorry,
we all
guys.
got reincarnated as slimes.
Yep.
Nice.
One of you
Right.
gets to be a mimic, actually.
Ooh.
Mimic.
Sweet.
Okay, so let's move on to the specific new lineages then. I had
Yes.
previously asked each one of you to sort of take the lead here on discussing the Dhampir, the Hexblood, and the Reborn. So why don't we start in that order? Preston, you want to start us off? Tell us about the Dhampir. What do you think about it? What's cool about it? What's potentially problematic about it?
So go in general first, and just kind of to me it's a lot like a Van Helsing type character where you have this innate ability in some way, form, or fashion. You have come upon or received a portion of a vampiric kind of powers or prowess, either in fighting or what have you, as well as that insatiable hunger for whatever that is. If the human flesh, is it blood, is it whatever kind of there's a whole
Spinal
table.
fluid.
Spinal fluid was my favorite.
Eyeballs, yeah. So dreams, that was another cool.
That was a good one.
Flavor.
Mhm.
So
Color too.
yeah,
Like,
That's
color.
very Marceline from
I
Adventure
was just gonna
Time.
say she has
Yeah.
to drink red.
yep. So that's basically that's the quick kind of like synopsis of it. There's the thing I liked about it is that it did also require for like your bite. It's not just vampiric touch where you're touching someone. You actually had like physically bite somebody or what have you. And I thought there was earlier, Mr. Rogers and I had an interesting conversation at lunch regarding like different effects that might come through that. Like if you're biting someone, can you smite them? Can you do all these other things? We won't get into that.
Well, no, let's get into it.
Look, it is considered a simple weapon attack.
Weapon,
Now.
Mhm.
yes.
So flurry of bites and smite and bite, are those things now? Bite and smite? I think those are
I think
things.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I love the idea too, like just from a fun flavor perspective and all that. Some of the things that it does, you are humanoid and undead, so that was a good call out that they were talking about, because I was concerned if it was humanoid and undead, of that situation where the only way this person heals, are they going to have to like try and subsist on their team members, or like where's that
Or on
coming
their
from?
bite attacks.
On the
or-
bite attacks, or like
Again, could be really fun.
it could be fun. Like it could present an interesting challenge. So if DMs, if you want to do that, that's great. You have the ability to spider climb. So you have the for those who don't know what that is, it's the ability to climb equal to your walking speed. In addition, at the third level, you can move
Even
up,
upside down.
vertical surfaces,
That's so
all
cool.
along ceilings, like full on like labyrinth type stuff.
Yep.
Then you have your vampiric bite. It's a natural weapon, which is a simple melee attack, melee weapon, as Mr. Rogers brought in. So I thought that was kind of cool. You have two things that are basically going to happen to you. You can regain the hit points from the bite equal to the damage dealt from the bite. And I'm glad that they said the bite specifically, because let's say you're a death cleric and you want to pour an extra necrotic energy into that bite. You're not going to like somehow mega heal off of one simple bite kind of thing. You also gain a bonus to the next ability check or attack, which I liked a lot because it's based on the damage that you dealt on the bite itself. So I thought that was kind of
Which is potentially huge.
yeah, it could be pretty big. Like
It might make monks viable finally.
Hey,
shots fired. So yeah, that's really the quick and dirty of it. They
You also
provide
get
some
5
origins.
extra feet of movement, by the way.
yeah, 35 moves.
35 instead of 30.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then it includes if you're small. So if you're a gnome and you hate being slow, like I do,
Oh yeah.
then that's a great
Quick,
trait to
tiny
go to.
vampire.
Nice.
What could possibly go wrong?
Okay, so here's a couple of questions.
Yeah.
It says, and I had to read this a couple of times, but I'm pretty sure this is the right interpretation. Speaking of the bite attack that you make, it doesn't say that you use your Constitution modifier for attack and damage rolls. It says you add your Constitution modifier to attack and damage rolls. So if I'm reading that right, it's basically saying, okay, if I have normally it's going to be a strength attack, right? Unless I have some other feature that's going to let me use a dexterity or a charisma or something.
Mhm.
So it's my strength mod plus my charisma mod.
No,
Both to
it's,
hit and to damage.
yeah.
Or not charisma, sorry, Constitution.
So you use your Constitution to attack, and you use your Constitution to deal damage as well.
Humble.
But what I'm saying is, what I think it's saying, and this seems to be the interpretation that I'm seeing online for most people anyway, is that I am using my strength to hit and to damage, and adding my con bonus to the hit and to the damage.
Well, it doesn't say you add it. It's
As you add, not you use.
Yeah, you add
your
Constitution modifier to the attack and the damage rolls.
Now you only get to use this like proficiency bonus number of times per day, so it's not like you can do this every turn.
Yeah. This is play testing. That's probably going to change. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think that's going to change to be this is a Constitution attack roll
instead of strength. Yeah,
I'm just thinking, you know, again, if you could do that every single turn, it would probably be overpowered, and maybe it's overpowered anyway. But since you can only do it your proficiency bonus number of times per day. Maybe they're saying, hey, yeah, let's make this really strong. It's going to be almost a guaranteed hit. It's going to do pretty decent damage. It's only a D4 of damage, but then if you're adding your strength and your con, it's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
And you can
it kind
heal
of becomes
from
that
it.
signature move for your character too. Like if you wanted to be like the cards are on the table, I need to pull out the ace in the hole kind of thing. You can use that kind of thing.
But
and you need to also be aware as a DM that this is only. You can only heal or use the ability mod off of it if you're half-life or below. You have to be essentially bloodied, to use the 4th edition term, before it actually works.
Right. So also kind of getting to Mr. Rogers' point, I mean, it seems to me like this is essentially a weapon attack. You're taking the attack action. You're basically making a weapon attack. So like if let's say I'm a 5th level barbarian and I have the extra attack feature, does that mean I get to bite and then, you know, use my greatsword for a second attack to make an attack? Or would you rule this as being, no, if you're going to take this action, this is the only thing you can do for your action?
It says it's a natural weapon and it's a melee weapon, which would follow the same attacks as any of the other stuff. I'd say you could, or like if you want to bite into them and start stabbing them with the dagger or something, or dagger of poison or something, whatever. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. It seems really powerful.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's exciting. I totally want it on.
I think it looks cool. I think you might see a little bit of tweaking about that strength thing, but other than that, I mean, you're only using it twice at first level to try and heal or get some extra advantage. Which there's better ways to do that than biting somebody. But
you do that Van Helsing type Constantine type character where you're dipping into the dark to save the light. So
a little Wesley Snipes blade going on. You know, it's always good fun.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to bring up about the Dhampir? All right. Thanks, Preston. So, Corey, talk to us about the Hexblood.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and put on my DM cap here. Colby, you're a basic human farmer, and times have been tough. Unfortunately, the crops are not really growing. It's getting towards late in the season, and things aren't really. They're not going well for you. Your wife is hungry. Your kids are non-existent, and you're really weird. You're really wondering how you're going to be able to survive the winter and make sure that you can get to that firstborn child, like every good human farmer wants. And then a little old lady comes up, and she's just passing by, and you see that she's stumbling, and she asks you for the barest morsel, anything that you can spare, and you happily give her some because you're a good person. And she says thank you, and she gives you an offer. How would you like your crops to grow wild and free and just enormous, way higher than even a giant could stand? And you think about it for a moment, and while it seems like it'd be a lot of work to cut down that many stalks, you kind of realize, sure, let's go for it. And she strikes the bargain with you, and she just snaps her fingers and then walks away. And sure enough, the next day, crops are growing. You have a great harvest that year, and in exchange, all it costs you is a little bit of a mark on your firstborn daughter. And she comes out, and she's got this little. It almost seems like a permanent crown attached to her head, vines twisting, and they almost seem to be made of flesh, but they are colored to look like actual vines. And that's just one example of what the Hexblade can offer you. The Hexblade is an amazing lineage, in my opinion. I love hags. Anybody who's played a game with me knows that I love to introduce hags into my game. Yes. I think the old witch stereotype is perfect. Hags come from a variety, Hexbloods come from a variety of different origins. They're fey and humanoid. And you can either be a cursed child from a hag, you could be raised by a hag, you could be raised by fey creatures, or given or kind of kicked out of the Feywild, and now you're wandering alone and you have just the barest hint of your fey abilities. There's a lot of really cool different origins that they give you, and of course, sky's the limit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have 30 feet of movement, so no extra bonus there. You have dark vision. You have advantage on saving throws to being charmed or ending charmed because you have fey resilience. And then you have hex magic, which is the really big pull for this. And it lets you cast Disguise Self and Hex once per day, and then any number of other times off of your spell casting modifiers. You can cast it with your spells. So basically, you get a free cast of Hex, which I know Colby really likes. I know this is going to change some builds for you, but basically at level 1, you get Hex.
Only for story purposes, because I think it makes a really cool story. It has nothing to do with the fact that previously the only way to get Hex was to either multi-class into Warlock or take a feat that would give you a first level spell, like a Magic Initiate Warlock feat or something like that. Man,
Now,
that's really good because Hex is such a good spell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is. And having one free casting of it each day, it's really good.
And additional castings as long as you have spell slots to burn, right?
Yeah, true.
But without having to take a feat or dip into Warlock for it. I mean, yeah, there are a couple of builds that I would probably redo.
And then the other thing that you get, which I think is actually really gross. I don't like this ability because I think it's gross, but it works for the Gothic aesthetic. Is you can pull off one of your nails, pull out a tooth, or take a lock of your hair and give it to somebody, and you can basically, I think it lets you. It lets you telepathically communicate with them for the day. And you can use an action to see out of that object as if you were seeing the area around it instead of your current location. You could basically scry on it whenever. And it doesn't say here, and this is the reason why it does say that the missing part regrows. Oh, good. All right, I like it better now. I thought I didn't see that part at the end. It was just
permanently missing your fingernail.
This is my last tooth.
So is it every time you clip your nails,
Nasty.
like you go and like you're seeing through, okay, is it this one? No, is it this one? No, it's
crap. Which one is it? Yeah, it's like finding a nail in a nail stack. But there's a lot of really cool things, and they give you some good different things about being a hag and different traits that you can get from it. They even give you a full thing of, hey, if you want to have your character end up becoming a hag, they do say that you have to consent to it. So a hag can't do a ritual on you and turn you into one, but you can end up having your character fall to this dark path and become a hag in this coven. So
that brings me to a question that I didn't ask and that I have been thinking about, because it seems to me like when I read about these new lineages, that it's basically you make this decision at level 1, and it essentially takes the place of your race, right? And you could have previously been a different race. Maybe you're a human or an elf or a dwarf or a gnome or whatever, but now you are not those things. You are, a Hexblood or a Dhampir or a Reborn. And so I guess my question is, and again, I'm more interested in your interpretation of rules as written. Could I, at some point in my character's career, decide, you know what, I got bit by a vampire, and even though we're 8 levels into this campaign, like I'm no longer a gnome, now I'm a Dhampir, and therefore I'm going to replace my abilities that were gnomish previously with these new Dhampir abilities.
I kind of feel like that's something that you should probably, if you do intend to do something like that, like down the road, or you want to have this big like
character
ceremony
arc,
about it or something, I would definitely talk to the DM and try and see if they can work it into the story, because it's one of those like, oh, suddenly I wake up this morning and now I have vampire powers. That just kind of cheapens your experience as a player, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great opportunity for a DM to be able to hook into it and say, hey, you run into this hag or you run into this vampire or whatever it is, and then be able to gain these attributes.
That's why you introduced the vampire girlfriend early on.
Yeah.
I remember
Lilith.
that.
Yep.
What's her name again? Lolth?
Lilith.
Lilith.
She's not the spider queen.
Oh,
That would be
that would be
Rules-
a horrible
much worse.
girlfriend.
Yeah, rules as written though, you
Unless
are
you're
not
goth.
allowed to change your race,
right.
and these are basically replacing your race from the beginning. So rules is written, nope, your race is gnome. You can't become a vampire unless your GM approves. And again,
Sure.
the GM approval is the big part there, because
Right.
now a GM has a way to say, oh, your character died and was brought back to life. Oh, great. Well, now you're a vampire, and now you're a reborn.
Right.
Instead of being like, okay, well, now I need to figure out what type of rules to give you for vampirism and what's too powerful and things like that. It's like, no, here's a new race for you that lets you replace your old one, and because you don't have to worry about ability scores anymore, because that's all taken care of outside of that, like, it makes it super easy for a GM to plug and play when their players get too deep and end up pissing off the wrong person.
Yeah.
Like Strahd, that should have happened to us in our first Strahd session, right? We all come back as vampires.
Yep.
'cause-
Yeah, exactly.
Because we were a little too cocky and we didn't run
Or are
from
we?
the
Oh, yeah, I
dire
would've-
wolves when we should have.
I would have absolutely loved this back then, to be like, oh, well, you can actually make a deal and come back as a reborn or a Hexblood, kind of thing. But now you have to serve the hags, or serve this weird guy that likes to experiment on corpses. What's going on?
Right. So speaking of being reborn as something else, that's a perfect segue into Mr. Rogers. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this lineage?
Oh, the Reborn is so cool. So I've been spending the last little while playing Cyberpunk 2077, and it's a pretty cool game. And I instantly thought of this in regards to Cyberpunk, because in that game, big spoiler alert, you have a person living in your head and you die and now come back to life because they're in your brain. So
You
this
just
is
totally
like
spoiled the
perfect
game
for
for
that.
me.
That's the prologue. That's
You're not
before
gonna
you
play
even
it
get
anyway.
literally
You're
in
not
the
gonna play
trailers.
You know I'm probably not going to play it anyway. So
So I instantly thought of that, and it's awesome. So you basically are humanoid and undead, and the gist of it is
construct.
construct. Correct. You can be a construct. You have died at some point, and for whatever reason, you have come back, and it gives you a couple different options as far as your origins. So you can be, this is what made me think of Cyberpunk. Your body hosts a possessing spirit that shares its memories and replaces your missing appendages with phantasmal limbs.
That
That's
was
pretty
a really
cool.
good one. Mhm.
This one creeped me out really bad. In public, you pass as an unremarkable individual, but you can feel the itchy straw stuffing inside of you. That freaks me out.
It literally makes me start to itch.
It's Scarecrow.
So that's real creepy. So yeah, there's a handful of origins. It's awesome. So as far as like some of the stats, you are humanoid, construct, or undead. Your movement is 30 feet. Then you're either medium or small, which I think is across the board the same.
Mhm.
With this, you get dark vision. So you can see in dim light within 60 feet as if it were bright light, and in darkness 60 feet as if it were dim light. And then you have deathless nature, which means you have advantage on saving throws against disease and being poisoned. And you have resistance to poison damage. You have advantage on death saving throws, which is huge. You don't need to eat, drink, or breathe. So have fun going underwater and doing whatever you need to do there.
Put them in a bag of holding.
Yep.
Exactly. You don't need to sleep, and magic can't put you to sleep. That's huge. You can finish a long rest in 4 hours as long as you spend those hours inactive, which I think is awesome.
I always imagine it's just like,
Just zoned out. Like,
Yeah.
what's creepy
Drool.
with this too is you get these lost memories, these faded memories, as they call it. And there's a roll table for it, but it's basically you're remembering parts of your past life, or parts of somebody else's life if you're infused with the spirit or whatever. And so the DM can use these as a character development moment, or just when you're, instead of sleeping, you're sitting staring out at nothing, having these weird memories, which is pretty cool.
you can also use them to get a skill roll, can't
Right.
you?
Yeah, bonus to your
Yeah,
skill roll,
bonus.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's like is it a D6?
Yeah. D6.
Yes.
So that's some nice utility.
Very cool.
Yeah, so this one is a lot of role play options here, as well as some pretty great features that you can use in your game, like not being able to go to sleep and not being put to sleep and not or being resistant to poison damage. So just all these awesome features here, which I think just open the door for role play in an awesome way.
What I think about when I think about this character, and actually the Dhampir, the consuming color. So I think someone from Wizards of the Coast has been reading Brandon Sanderson. Warbreaker, the Warbreaker novel, which is among his lesser known, less popular novels, but is fantastic, has both of these aspects. The Reborn, people come back as gods, and they're like, anyway, and also color comes into it, and you actually use color to sort of fuel the magic system in the world.
I'm sorry, your 30 seconds of Brandon Sanderson talk is up.
Any more, and we're gonna have to charge him $1,000.
Yeah, that's right.
He's gonna charge us, one of the two.
Yeah.
A little bit of actual out of character Strahd history for you guys. When my brother was coming up with his character for our Strahd campaign, he originally wanted to be an undead, like flat out. And I went, I really don't know how that would work. We'd have to work it in there. Like, let me think about it and try and figure it out. And he just decided to go human after that. But having the Reborn would have been really handy.
So Scott's a big fan of this. Well, I mean, you're a fairly lenient DM. There's probably no reason why you couldn't kill him off in game and let him come back.
I mean, he's a necromancer. He could probably do that to himself.
Just come back himself.
So no, go ahead.
No, you.
I was gonna say, well, this comes into question, like places that are like hallowed ground. How does that apply to these kind of characters that are half undead, half humanoid?
Humanoid means you can walk on them.
So is humanoid supersede?
Because I would say that if something is a negative effect for only one of the races, they're leaning more towards the you can because you're also this.
Right.
Yeah.
So
They
you're
don't want to penalize
inclusion.
you.
You're uncomfortable in the space, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it probably would create some great role play opportunities.
What about turn
for you
undead?
to-
What if an enemy casts turn undead and you are a Dhampir? Do you have to now run away?
Yep. If you are an enemy, like if an enemy specifically hits a turn undead spell because they are targeting you, your undead comes into play there. Yep. I think as far as like universal kind of nebulous effects, the intent is that it's good for heroes, bad for enemies, but an enemy is always trying to be bad for heroes. So an enemy's spells will affect them as negatively as possible.
What if a player cleric casts turn undead and you happen to be nearby? Is it going to affect you?
I think you choose who you're targeting, though, right? Are you your target?
I'd have to remember.
Channel divinity. You start with turn undead. When you use your channel divinity, sorry. Here we go. Turn undead. Each undead that can see or hear you within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom save.
So I would say give them advantage. I would say that person would have advantage because they are half human.
Mm-hmm. Advantage or as a GM, it's your call. If you want that to be a limiting thing, again, if you want to make it harder for your players, you can. Sure. If not, just say because you are human enough, it doesn't affect you. Or it makes you uncomfortable, it gives you like a -1 for your next attack or something.
The cleric can be nice and say, close your eyes, because now you can't see him, and then does the spell.
Yep.
No, but I thought it's everyone that you can see. Did I misread that?
Oh, maybe I misread
that you can hear or see.
Each undead that can see or hear you. You're right.
So
see or hear. So they have to plug their ears and close their eyes.
We had this discussion when we were making Strahd, and you wanted to be a cleric there, Colby. You thought, you wanted to, but you knew that we were going to have a necromancer in the group, and you're like, how does that work? And I'm like, eventually it would be fine.
Yeah. That's interesting. I would say, and I don't really DM, so this would never really apply because I don't have a table that I run. But if I did, it seems like rules as written, like you're turned or you have to make a save, right?
Yeah, if you run strictly rules as written, yeah.
Which is cool. I mean, again, we were kind of talking about this at lunch, Mr. Rogers and Preston and I, about how like when fails in the game lead to really cool, memorable, great moments in the story. I mean, more often than not, epic failings or conflict create some of the best moments in game for story and things, right? And so, like, there was a time, again, we've been talking a lot about Strahd, and I think it's appropriate because of the goth thing that we've got going today. But I was playing this lawful good paladin, or I should say, lawful good paladin, and Corey's brother Scott is playing this necromancer, and there has been like some headbutting going on, right? Where like the first time he brought a skeleton, he raised a skeleton, I think I attacked it, but it was this great moment where I rolled a 1, and I not only did I miss, but I think I fell like in some zombie goo or something like that, and I was like freaking out, and it was both funny and also really cool, and kind of gave us a chance to be like, it's okay, everybody's fine, like he's under my control. You're like this demonic Asimir guy anyway. You've got your own demons, no pun intended, that you're dealing with. Like, I can have this sort of skeleton that you think of as evil, but it's not really evil. And I don't know, led to some great sort of storytelling moments, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So imagine, you the first time your cleric casts Turn Undead and it turns your companion, and you're like,
and your Dhampir gnome just goes, and runs away.
Yeah, exactly. It could be really cool, and would definitely be something that you would look back on as a party and laugh about, and tell stories about in the future. And that ultimately is, what this game is all about, and what makes for the best and most memorable moments, I think. Right. Cool. Anything else that anybody wanted to discuss about the Gothic Lineages?
No.
Before we wrap,
I want to play them, all of them, really bad.
All of them. Yeah.
While
I want to
blasting-
be a Dhampir, Hexblood, Reborn, all at the same time.
And I want to have my Chemical Romance playing full blast in the background while doing so.
Yes.
Well,
or
sounds like-
Evanescence.
Evanescence. Yep.
Sounds like we've got the seeds of our next one shot coming up. I can see it brewing. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate having you. Thanks for your time. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and hope you got something out of this and you learned something cool, and that you're as excited as we are about this new Unearthed Arcana. And, would love to hear both your opinions on it and also, results. If anybody has tried playing this in game, would love to hear kind of your thoughts on it. If you think one of the lineages or another is particularly too powerful, I am already crafting like a beast barbarian Dhampir that's basically like this werewolf, and he's attacking with his claws and then he's biting, and it's going to be really strong, and I can't wait to make it. So anyway, love you guys. Have a fantastic day. Thanks again to all my DMs for being here, and we'll see you guys soon.